downstairs bathroom braced for the worst. But even he is stunned by the severity of Melissa's injuries.
I've never seen that much amount of blood in a scene.
It's a vicious crime, unlike anything the tight-knit community of Austell has ever seen. But why would someone murder a 16-year-old girl? As the investigation deepens, police will unearth a motive so shocking it will leave this community reeling.
16 years of law enforcement, this was the worst scene that I've seen.
Born in 1991, Melissa Wells was blessed with both a sharp mind and a sunny disposition.
Oh, Melissa was wonderful. When she attended school, she got all A's and B's. She did a lot of activities in school, like chorus. She played the violin.
Through her vast interest in activities, Melissa easily made friends, but none better than classmate Sarai Beeg.
Melissa was very outgoing. She was goofy. She always had a smile on her face, no matter what.
Although it seemed like the talented and popular teen had everything going for her, nobody's life is perfect. Melissa's father left their family when she was only 7 years old, and when her mother became engaged to a new man 7 years later, Melissa was none too pleased.
When Melissa moved out to live with her grandparents when I was in the 6th grade, and I think she was in the 8th, because she didn't get along too
Marlissa's friends and family console each other, Austell police get to work processing the gruesome crime scene, which is made all the more disturbing by its location.
The grandparents used the downstairs portion of it for a daycare, and there were a lot of kids' things down there.
Examining Marlissa's body, investigators find more than 60 stab wounds, primarily to her head and neck.
There was also a large gash along the side of her neck that may have been fatal.
What's more, the killer wasn't content with merely stabbing Marlissa. Her head had been bashed against the toilet.
The porcelain tank lid on the toilet was busted and cracked, and part of porcelain lay next to her head.
The cause of death was a combination of the blunt force injuries plus the stab and incise wounds that Marlissa received.
There's also a third type of injury, one that deeply disturbs investigators.
She had a fork that was literally stuck in her back and had been bent over.
I've seen a lot through my years. The fork was the first time I've seen that.
Judging from the trail of blood, detectives soon surmise where the attack on Marlissa began.
I could tell that a confrontation happened somewhere upstairs in the kitchen, living room area. In the kitchen where the knives and forks were stored at, they were all messed up.
So we believe a perpetrator got the knives from inside of the house, caused injury to her upstairs, and then chased her downstairs with some of those knives.
I always speculated Marlissa was running to get away. I speculated she was running to try to get in the bathroom to lock the door.
As for the murder weapons, detectives soon locate them inside the bathroom trash can.
I happened to look down, and I noticed that at the top of the trash can, there was a baby diaper that was just laid across the top, and it seemed odd to me. And when I pulled the diaper back, I was able to see 3 knife handles, and I was able to see one knife blade, and the knife blade had blood on it.
Having discovered the murder weapons, the question for investigators now is, who was wielding them?
This took some time. This was somebody that clearly had some rage issues. There were certain marks on her that were indicative of the fork having been used to stab her repeatedly. Not so much a good murder weapon, but certainly evidence that you're very angry with the person and want to send some sort of message.
Just what kind of killer would go to these extremes?
It would take somebody that has no conscience, no remorse. It would take somebody that is filled full of rage and anger to accomplish that state of brutality.
Which leads investigators to believe that the killer intended to murder Marlissa from the get-go. With the murder looking more and more personal, investigators reach out to Marlissa's family for help.
The first thing I want to know is, do you know anybody that would have done this to who was against Marlissa?
Marlissa's family can't imagine anyone who'd want to harm the friendly young choir girl.
Marlissa never got in any kind of trouble. She wasn't that type of young lady. She was a sweet, gentle soul.
Ma'am, could you think of anyone that would want to harm her? Did she have a boyfriend or someone of interest?
Well, she talked to this one boy on the phone a lot.
It was just friends, we don't even allow her to have any kind of boyfriends. And she's 16, this is a church girl.
According to the family, although Marlissa wasn't allowed to date, there was one young man for whom she clearly had feelings.
When the police asked me, did we know of anyone, all I've known was that the Matthew Wilkins. That was the only person Marlissa ever talked to me about. Matthew doesn't look like a viable suspect because he was 3 hours away at college when the incident occurred.
The school was a significant distance away from the Austell area. So one of the things that we had to look at is, where was he and what was he doing that weekend?
Police turned to Matthew's family, who live in nearby Douglasville. To investigators' surprise, Matthew's at home. It turns out he'd been visiting his family for the Martin Luther King holiday weekend.
When Matthew first learned of Marlissa's death, he was shocked.
He'd been away at college, he'd come home, and he's expecting to see her.
Matthew admits to police that he and Marlissa were in a relationship, one that had to be kept secret from her family.
Were you planning on seeing her this weekend?
I wanted to, but it's hard to see with her grandparents.
Matthew tells police that the only people he's seen since returning home for the holiday are his immediate family, who he says can corroborate his statement. This alibi, coupled with his demeanor, makes Matthew an unlikely suspect. But to be safe, detectives run a background check on Matthew. It's hardly the profile of a brutal murderer.
He didn't have any prior criminal history.
Police have no reason to think this mild-mannered basketball star would want his sweetheart dead. With Matthew Wilkins ostensibly scratched from the suspect list, detectives are plagued by the unsettling thought that a maniac might be on the loose.
When the crime was reported, it had a pretty drastic impact on the community.
But when detectives turn to the Austell community for leads, a lurid tip will cause them to question everything they think they know about their victim's relationship with Matthew Wilkins and the killer that would stop at nothing to see young Marlissa dead.
It's such a shock, and it was something certainly no one expected.
Tomorrow.
This was a devastating loss to the family members, particularly the grandparents. They were pretty devastated by what had happened and really in a state of shock until we could get on top of the investigation. It was by far one of the most brutal crime scenes that I've ever seen, and no family member should have to have that inflicted on them to see their loved one, particularly such a young lady, killed in the manner that she was and left there in this...
Hours after the brutal stabbing death of beloved 16-year-old high school student Marlissa Wells, friends and family in the Atlanta suburb of Austell, Georgia, are desperate for answers.
To lose a friend so young, especially the way that she died, it's unexplainable.
The fact that she had so many knife wounds, that there's a fourth that was actually used, suggested that this is somebody that clearly was very, very angry with her.
I did believe it was a targeted crime. I believe that Melissa knew her attacker. I believe the attacker knew her.
But despite the seemingly personal nature of the attack on Marlissa, police have all but ruled out those closest to her, including her boyfriend Matthew Wilkins, who Marlissa had been secretly dating for nearly 2 years.
When investigators looked into Matthew as a suspect, they realized he didn't have any prior criminal history. And he tells them that he hasn't spoke with Marlissa in a few days.
With no additional leads, detectives expand their search.
We had other officers immediately began canvassing the neighborhood, asking if anybody had seen anybody suspicious, anybody near the home, any suspicious vehicles.
It isn't long before investigators uncover a potential clue. A neighbor reports she'd recently noticed something unusual going on at Marlissa's home.
The investigators learned from talking to neighbors that perhaps there were a few boys that may have been snuck into the home when the grandparents weren't around.
So have you guys saw anyone coming or going from the house next door?
My daughter might have. She goes to the same school.
I saw John and Mike go in the house a couple of times.
Investigators learned that the gentlemen were John Gomez and Mike Jenkins.
It's a shocking revelation, which gets investigators thinking. With Marlissa's boyfriend Matthew Wilkins away at college, had the doe-eyed choir girl been seeing other boys? And could one of these potential suitors be her killer?
There's always a possibility that one of these guys could have made a sexual advance on her. She declined the sexual advance. They got into a rage. They were so angry at her, and they committed this heinous crime.
Later that same day, detectives questioned John Gomez and Mike Jenkins.
As you know, we're investigating the murder of Marlissa Wells.
Yes, now we have an eyewitness. She says that Marlissa was letting boys into her home.
Both young men insist they weren't romantically involved with Marlissa. What's more, they deny ever sneaking into her house.
I've never been in her house. No, my grandma would never let us in.
The boys were pretty cooperative with the police and led them to believe that they were not suspects.
But if neither John Gomez nor Mike Jenkins was the young man seen sneaking into the Wells residence shortly before the murder, who was? Marlissa's girlfriends all tell police that the only boy Marlissa would ever let in the house was her boyfriend, Matthew Wilkins.
One might describe the relationship that Melissa had with Matthew as being secretive, because Melissa's grandparents did not know about it. Her mom might have known some things about it, and her brother had heard some things, but pretty much only her close girlfriends and a couple of cousins knew about this relationship with Matthew.
But what Marlissa's girlfriends tell police next forever alters the investigation.
The friends of Marlissa told me that she was in love with Matthew, would do anything for Matthew, but Matthew has not had the same feelings towards her.
Marlissa said once Matthew went off to college, they became distant. He was a little bit irritable when they talked on the phone, and she was just afraid that he was losing interest in her.
Matthew didn't perceive his relationship with Marlissa as a committed one, but rather one to entertain while he was in town.
In fact, Marlissa's friends say Matthew had someone else more important in his life. A college freshman named Kara Chambers.
Matthew's relationship with Kara was public, which would mean that his relationship with Marlissa wasn't. And it became evident that Marlissa was the girlfriend on the side.
It was shocking to the investigators to find out about this other girlfriend because they were expecting that Matthew and Marlissa had a committed relationship. And from Melissa's point of view, they really were together. So they were not expecting that there would be another girl that Matthew had a relationship with.
Was it possible Kara Chambers had gotten wind of Matthew's romance with Marlissa and decided to confront her about it?
Finding about this girl that Matthew was dating could really lead detectives to her as being a possible suspect.
Matthew's girlfriend could have been upset when she learned of Marlissa and wanted to get him all to herself.
Police decide it's time to meet face-to-face with Kara Chambers. When they do, the shocking secret they learn will blow the case wide open. It's been days since the brutal beating and stabbing of 16-year-old Marlissa Wells. Police in the Atlanta suburb of Austell, Georgia, have just learned that the choir girl's secret romance with college hoop star Matthew Wilkins wasn't exclusive, at least not from Matthew's point of view.
The relationship with Marlissa was a quiet, kept secret, to the point where Matthew's parents said they didn't know her.
Wilkins actually had a girlfriend at the time and was kind of secretly seeing Marlissa on the side.
All of which have police wondering, had Matthew Wilkins' girlfriend, Kara Chambers, finally found out about Marlissa?
Investigators want to look into Matthew's girlfriend because she might have learned of Marlissa and wanted to take matters into her own hands.
Within hours, detectives speak to Kara Chambers.
We were able to locate her and interview her. And during the interview, she advised us that she had been in a relationship with Matthew until Christmas of 2007, at which time they broke it off.
I broke it off primarily because I felt that Matthew still loved me the way that I loved him. At one point, we thought about getting back together, but it didn't work out, so I decided to move on.
To detectives, Kara Chambers hardly sounds like the type of woman willing to commit murder for the love of Matthew Wilkins. But it's not just Kara's wavering affection for Matthew that rules her out as a suspect.
Several reasons. One, concrete alibi. She's in a military academy and had a sound alibi. The next thing is her demeanor, her willingness to open up.
In fact, Kara Chambers is quite frank when investigators broach a very tender subject.
Did you know about Marlissa?
Not personally, but I certainly knew of her. But I kind of figured he was a ladies' man.
Could you tell me anything about his relationship with Marlissa?
Not really. Like I said, we've been broken up for a while. But I did hear that Marlissa might be pregnant with his baby.
It's a stunning disclosure, one that could be a game changer.
The fact that Marlissa could have been pregnant most certainly was another motive for Matthew being seen as a suspect.
He was just beginning his life. He was on a basketball scholarship, he was in college, and he also had another girlfriend. So ultimately, he had a lot to lose.
Police are intrigued, to say the least. To learn more, they again turn to Marlissa's closest friends.
One of Marlissa Wells' cousins informed me that Marlissa was 3 months behind on her period and that she had been gaining weight.
Me and Marlissa were sitting at the lunch table when she told me that she thinks that she's pregnant. I had asked her if she had told Matthew, and she said not yet, but she was going to tell him.
Marlissa's friends say that when she finally worked up the courage to tell Matthew she was pregnant, he became upset.
She had called him and told him. He was very angry about it, and he told her that she needed to get an abortion. Marlissa cried about it when she told me about him saying that.
He was a basketball star. He had his sights on finishing college. He had his sights on being with someone else. And now Marlissa was becoming a liability and not an asset.
Marlissa's friends tell detectives Marlissa considered having an abortion if it would make Matthew happy. But the more she prayed about it, the more Marlissa knew that having an abortion went against her core beliefs.
Not only that, I felt like her love was so strong for Matthew that she wanted to have something to connect them two together, whether he wanted to be there for or whether he didn't want to be there for.
When Marlissa decided not to get an abortion, she definitely got happier about it. Marlissa would say, "I'm gonna be a good mommy."
For investigators, this revelation catapults Matthew Wilkins back to the top of the suspect list.
We started looking at Matthew because it was giving him a motive to why he would want to end the life of Marlissa.
Adding fuel to that theory is Marlissa's 12-year-old brother, Eric. Eric recalls an incident between Marlissa and Matthew that got extremely heated.
Melissa and Matthew was on the phone one night, and I guess I walked in, and she had him on speakerphone, and I could overhear him saying, threats and what he'll do.
Marlissa's brother also said that he witnessed a conversation between Marlissa and Matthew over MySpace where he threatened to kill her.
Young Eric says that despite the threats on her life, Marlissa refused to give up on Matthew.
Marlissa, like many other women, stay in situations that are abusive because of the fact that they might not see themselves as beautiful and as appealing to other people as she should. And so she believed that no one else probably wanted her.
To corroborate the statements made by Marlissa's brother, police reach out to her close friend and classmate, Sarai Beeg.
I spoke to Marlissa Saturday morning. Her grandparents were going to a funeral, so they weren't going to be home. Marlissa said that Matthew was coming over to talk about the pregnancy, and she was going to let him know that she's keeping the baby.
I said that he was there. I placed him at the scene.
Procuring an emergency search warrant, detectives seized copies of Matthew and Marlissa's cell phone records.
We saw no less than 18 phone calls between the two of them in the days leading up to her death, and in fact, the last of which was at 10:46 in the morning, just around the time that her grandparents would have left the house to go to the funeral.
His last conversation was at 10:46, then he never spoke to her again. So definitely somebody we wanted to talk to.
With the cell phone evidence in hand, detectives race to the Wilkins family residence in nearby Douglasville. They're hoping to catch Matthew before he heads back to school. However, when detectives arrive, they will find much more than they bargained for.
We could not believe that something like this was even possible.
Investigating the stabbing death of 16-year-old Marlissa Wells, police in the Atlanta suburb of Austell, Georgia, have zeroed in on her secret lover, 19-year-old college hoop star Matthew Wilkins, as the crime's prime suspect.
Initially, Matthew wasn't a suspect because he really didn't have a motive. But after further investigation, he becomes the prime suspect in the case.
He didn't want the baby she did, and she was intending on keeping this baby. That would be a reason for him to want to get rid of her.
Also, phone records revealed that he had been in touch with her several times the day the murder had occurred.
However, without a confession or physical evidence tying Matthew to the crime, police don't have enough to justify an arrest.
Investigators first went to Wilkins' house with the hopes that they would be able to get a statement from him.
Police are counting on Matthew's parents, both ministers, to convince their son to do the right thing.
They were cooperative to a point. They did not like us there. We explained to them why we're there.
Once they heard what type of an investigation it was, they essentially shut down.
Matthew, don't you say anything until we speak with an attorney.
While it's a setback for detectives, it doesn't stop them from taking the next step.
After he had invoked his rights, we were able to obtain a search warrant.
The next day, investigators returned to the Wilkins home in hopes of finding blood evidence.
Anywhere there was a spot to put something, we checked. From top to bottom, and pretty much every single room in the house.
You find anything yet?
Not yet.
Just as police are about to give up, Officer Roy Collar spots a rope hanging from the ceiling.
There was an attic door that pulls down with steps on it. I pulled it down and was able to make entry into the attic. And in the middle of right where the air and heating unit was these pile of clothes. It was very odd for it to be there.
The pile of clothing consists of sweatpants and a hoodie wrapped around a pair of sneakers.
And there appeared to be what appeared to the naked eye as blood stain on the shoelaces of the tennis shoes.
It's only the tiniest of drops, But it's enough for police to seize the shoes and clothing and to arrest Matthew Wilkins on the spot.
Matthew had no emotional reaction when he was arrested. He never spoke. He had a blank stare. Not so much traumatized, just disconnected stare.
After arresting Matthew, detectives send the blood evidence to the lab for testing. Weeks later, they receive the results.
Ultimately, the testing on the shoes revealed that one spot was indeed Marlissa's blood, a clear link from Wilkins to our crime scene.
On April 3rd, 2008, Matthew Wilkins is formally indicted on murder charges.
It was a complete shock to her grandparents and to her family members and the community as well.
Matthew's friends were shocked to think that Matthew could ever be involved in such a crime as this. They saw him as this quiet, reserved guy.
There was that sense that we really wanted to get justice for Marlissa. This was a devastating situation for her family.
On March 3rd, 2010, the state of Georgia versus Matthew Wilkins gets underway in Cobb County Superior Court.
It was an extremely stressful atmosphere being in the trial itself because the stakes were so high.
Prosecutors allege that on January 19th, 2008, Marlissa and Matthew made plans to see one another after her grandparents left for a funeral. They say at 10:46 a.m., Matthew called one last time, and she told him the coast was clear. Though Marlissa wanted to tell Matthew of her intentions of keeping the baby, that conversation wasn't the first thing the young lovers engaged in.
It was brought out at the autopsy that sexual intercourse had been performed between Matthew and Marlissa.
It was found that Matthew's DNA matched the DNA specimen that was taken from Marlissa.
Exact time I don't know, but it was recent, before the attack.
I said it once, I've said it a million times. I am having this baby, Matthew.
Prosecutors assert that after they made love, the two began to talk about Marlissa's pregnancy.
I'm in school, okay?
I'm here.
I have a future.
You're not the child.
They argued. The more he tried to convince her that she should get rid of the baby, the more she was emphatically stating that she wanted this baby.
According to prosecutors, that's when Matthew snapped.
He decided the only way that I can control you and be able to make sure that you don't ruin my life is to kill you.
He stabbed her once and really did have the intent to kill her.
Prosecutors assert that Marlissa got away, but only for a moment.
Ultimately, she ended up being cornered in the bathroom. I believe he took her head and struck it against the toilet. She was probably incapacitated. Then he got on top of her and began stabbing her with the knives.
He blamed her for what was going to happen to his life. He blamed her for the outcome. So every stab wound was another way of him getting rid of the anger and the blame that he had on her for what was happening to his life.
To support their assertions, prosecutors introduced the cell phone evidence, as well as the blood collected from Matthew's sneakers.
There was blood that matches Marlissa's blood on the shoes.
When it's their turn, Matthew's attorneys claim that cell phone records prove nothing more than the couple's desire to be in constant contact with one another. And the spot of blood on Matthew's shoes is far too minuscule for such a bloody crime.
The defense argued that the blood evidence on Matthew's shoe was so small that it could have come from any time and not necessarily just that day of such a gruesome murder. And they argued that Matthew's clothing, if he was in fact the killer, would have been covered in blood.
But perhaps the defense's strongest argument is an alibi provided by Matthew's mother, a minister revered throughout the suburban Atlanta community.
She stated that Matthew had been with her all day. There was no way that he could have been there and done anything.
The DA was cross-examining her, and his mother replied, God was her witness that her son was at home.
It's a statement that could carry a lot of weight with a Cobb County jury.
You never know which way it's going to go. It all comes down to the 12 men and women sitting in that jury box. How they're going to see it through their eyes is going to be the end result.
In a tense courtroom, the state of Georgia versus Matthew Wilkins is drawing to a close. The prosecution alleges Matthew beat and stabbed his 16-year-old girlfriend Marlissa Wells to death when she refused to get an abortion.
To know that you just had sex with this individual and then to take her life like that, get up and go on as if nothing ever happened, it is unfathomable.
Matthew's defense team argues that never happened. They attempt to rebut the cell phone records and physical evidence. But their strongest defense is the sworn testimony of Matthew's mother, a well-respected minister.
Matthew's mother provided an alibi for Matthew. She stated that he was with her at the time of the crime.
It's compelling testimony, but prosecutors counter by revisiting Matthew's cell phone records, which paint a far different picture of where Matthew was at the time of the crime.
The prosecution refuted Matthew's mother's testimony by showing phone records that in fact place Matthew in a close proximity to Marlissa's grandparents' house at the time.
After the crime, we were able to see some pretty significant activity. We saw his mother and himself, they were exchanging phone calls with each other.
If he was with her, why would he be calling her? When the DA actually discredited her, I was dumbfounded because, first of all, his mother, Mrs. Wilkins, is a minister. And she got up on the stand and lied.
With the testimony of Matthew's mother discredited, both sides rest their case. On March 10th, 2010, the jury returns with its verdict.
While awaiting the verdict, the courtroom was very quiet. Obviously, Marlissa's family was very emotional, but ready to get this behind them.
The jury, after 5 hours of deliberating, found Matthew guilty of murder. When the verdict was read, we were relieved. We were praising God and thanking God that he did not get away with this.
Matthew had no reaction or no response throughout the entire trial. He never looked, he never made eye contact with anybody except the wall in front of him.
On March 18th, 2010, the judge sentences Matthew Wilkins to life in prison, plus an additional 20 years for aggravated battery.
The judge even commented during the sentencing that the entire courtroom had been affected by this trial, and yet he had shown no emotion and no remorse, and I believe that's why he gave him the ultimate sentence that he could.
Although justice has been served, there's a tragic twist in this case.
Ultimately, the autopsy revealed that Marlissa was in fact not pregnant.
Instead, she was suffering from some medical conditions that gave her an irregular menstrual cycle.
I mean, the whole case is sad, especially to the point where she was murdered for a reason that wasn't even so.
If there's anything to be learned from this case, it's to know who you should put your trust in, and I feel like Marlissa probably put her trust in someone who obviously did not deserve it.
Marlissa would definitely want everybody.